Well, I just watched a video upload by Prudent Discourse. Hey, Prudent. It's been a while since we've talked. I've been in a couple of hangouts with Prudent before. Talking to Matt Slick, and it's also been a while since I've talked about presuppositional apologetics, which is essentially what style of debate tactic, I guess, Matt Slick seemed to be using there. And I know I've kind of left this topic, but I really just have to comment. I haven't seen a lot of Matt Slick before. I've seen some of Deconverted Man's videos where he answers some of his questions and some other things. And I've heard of Matt Slick. I think I saw an episode of The Atheist Experience once where he was on, but I haven't been that much familiar with him. For a guy who apologizes so much for seeming to be disrespectful and saying, that he doesn't mean to be, he means this in all love and sincerity and that sort of thing. He seems to misrepresent people quite an awful lot. And I think the presuppositional apologetic, the way that it's put forth on YouTube, is a dishonest one. I've said that before many times. I've given the reasons why. I've made videos on it before. And this was a clear-cut, I think, example of that. A good example of misrepresenting somebody. So, you can apologize all day long for seeming to be disrespectful because you're being forward. And I understand that. Sometimes there's no way to get your point across without seeming to be disrespectful, even if that's not what you mean. Sometimes you got to be forward. But you lose your credibility with me in apologizing when you pretty much intentionally misrepresent someone. Prudent had said at one point that what might convince him, what would help, an example of something that would help convince him of the existence of God would be something empirical, like, for instance, a Bible verse written on the moon that we could clearly see. That would be pretty substantial. And he went on to say that, that would probably convince a lot of people. You might convert the entire world with that. Now, I have my doubts about that. I would have, there's some verification steps that need to be done there in order to, make sure that this wasn't a hologram or some government operation of some sort. There's all kinds of funny conspiracy theories about that. But, obviously there'd be some verification steps involved there. But he said, it would have to be accessible to everybody, of course, for everyone to be convinced. And Matt Slick's response to that was, "Oh, so you're talking about an argument from popularity, an argument from population. You would need everybody to be convinced for you to be convinced, and therefore, if everyone believes it, then it's true." This isn't what Prudent was saying at all. He was just saying if everyone were to be convinced, it would have to be accessible to everyone, and we couldn't rely on, essentially what he was saying is we couldn't rely on word of mouth. This is something that would have to be empirically verifiable to everyone. And then Matt Slick went further to say you are being irrational because essentially what you're saying is scripture written on a rock would convince you, and yet we have that. The 10 Commandments were written on a rock, and it's recorded for all to see, and you don't believe it. It's an intentional misrepresentation and complete misframing of what Prudent said. Of course, written on a rock here on Earth is quite a bit different than being written on the moon. There's some substantial burdens to even mankind producing a large enough scripture written on the moon to sort of make it, much more of a special case than just something chiseled into a flippin' rock here on Earth. Not to mention, quite a bit of a difference between you being able to see it with your own eyes and having somebody have written it. Hey, I might not be all that smart, but I don't believe everything I read. You know what I mean? Intentional misrepresentations, and that is the dishonesty that I see put forth by most of the peddlers of the presuppositional apologetic, at least as it's put forth here on YouTube. The basis behind the presuppositional method is, I understand, it's a critical philosophy. It's putting your opponent's views through, that lens, a logical, rational framework, and challenging the presuppositions. But the dishonesty there is, you'll notice that if you listen to this video, watch this video, and I'm not sure it's worth it, but you'll notice that Matt is very careful to keep Prudent on the defense the entire time. And in nowhere in that video, or that discussion, does Matt Slick defend his own presuppositions, nor does he give Prudent Discourse the equality of having his own presuppositions. Now, in his defense on that, Prudent didn't really sort of say outwardly, these are my base presuppositions. That, you know, we have to, I mean, he sort of did. I shouldn't say that. He sort of did. He just didn't come out and say, these are my base presuppositions. You have base presuppositions as well. And, you know, if you're going to talk about rationality and logic, you have to extend me that same courtesy that you're demanding for yourself. And it's interesting too, because as I've said in videos past, the presuppositional method is really hinged upon the honesty of the non-believer in responding to questions. Prudent is honest enough to admit when he doesn't know something, or when we have an unclear understanding of that. And, you know, Matt makes a bunch of fallacious arguments about how we don't understand it, and it's sort of a God of the gaps argument, that we don't understand it, therefore, well, there were many things that we didn't understand in history, and God of the gaps were thrown in there. Pele was thrown in to explain volcanoes. We kind of know a little bit better now. We understand the science of volcanoes. You can insert anything you like into that particular structure. There are many things that we didn't know about before, how they function, what the origin of them was. We do understand them now. We can even reproduce a lot of the same results ourselves to confirm that. And the God of the gaps is tossed out the window. And I mean, you know, there's there's the honesty of the unbeliever that he's speaking to that really works to his favor. I mean, they totally take advantage of that, right? It's manipulative, and I think it's disingenuous. Of course, on their side of the fence, the interesting thing is, you know, when we're talking about presuppositions, yes, okay, we all have presuppositions. I made videos on that in the past too. I'm happy to agree that we all have presuppositions. The presuppositions that the apologist has are just wonderful. They're just perfect. I mean, how much better can it get? Don't know the answer to a question? God is omniscient. God is omnipotent. What can't be done? It can answer anything. I think it's a lazy presupposition as well. And, you know, all the questions about empiricism and things like that Matt is asking of Prudent, well, they all apply to him as well. How did you read the Bible? I hope you didn't read it with eyeballs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's just silly. It's disingenuous, and it's one of the more frustrating videos that I've watched in the last little while. To see someone being so dishonest and making sure that they keep the focus on the other guy, right? Because they understand, they know that they are basing everything on presuppositions as well. And I think, obviously, their presuppositions are weak. Because, yes, sure, your presuppositions explain everything. Yeah, they do. Yeah, sure. Your presuppositions explain everything. Our presuppositions don't necessarily explain everything, because we're honest about the gaps in our knowledge. We're honest about that. Your presuppositions explain everything, but they're only because, by definition, they explain everything. My presupposition is that everything I believe is correct. You know, essentially, right? Because your presupposition allows for that. Omniscience, omnipotent, anything is possible, and therefore. Anyway, I made a video on this once where I narrated something that I'd written, and it was kind of time specific. I'm even considering rewriting that, formatting that so that it's not time specific, not situationally specific, and can be watched at any time by anyone, and maybe highlighting that on my channel. I've got a video up there highlighted about the morality of rape, you know, secular versus Christian, and that one's really kind of stale now. But I might do that if I get a chance, because I think it's worthwhile. But if you want to be frustrated, just watch this video. I'll link it below. Hello again to Prudent. Thanks everyone for watching.